Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. Hello, musical talkers, and welcome to another episode of Musical Talk. This is David Herzog chatting with you folks again, and in just a little while we are going to be listening to the remainder of the interviews that I conducted for Urinetown the Musical, which is still currently running here in London at the St. James Theatre until May the 3rd. You recently heard the chat I had with the wonderful Katie Bernstein just a week or so ago, and we're going to be following up that interview today with two chats that I had with Mr. Richard Fitch and Mr. Aaron Lee Lambert. Richard and I go quite a few years back. We both attended LIPA at the same time. LIPA, for those of you who don't know, is the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts. That's a school where both Richard and I were students back in the day. Aaron Lee Lambert and I also know each other from a few years back as we both participated in a Perfect Pitch musical. We both worked on a workshop piece with Mr. Dougal Irvine and a wonderful company of folks from that organization. Richard is the resident director with Urinetown the Musical, and Aaron is playing Billy Boy Bill in the piece. Now, before we get to those interviews, first let's hear what the folks at Urinetown have to say about the show itself. This is taken directly from their website, and it begins with a little bit of history on the piece. It says, Greg Cottis conceived the original idea for Urinetown after encountering a pay-per-use toilet whilst traveling in Europe. He began writing the award-winning book shortly after, joining with Mark Holman, composer and lyricist. Urinetown was nominated for 10 Tony Awards, winning for Best Book, Score, and Direction. Urinetown is a social and political satire set in a fictional future where a terrible 20-year drought has crippled the city's water supplies. Water is so scarce that the government enforces a ban on all private toilets in an effort to control water consumption. The citizens must now use the public pay-per-use amenities, owned and operated by Urine Good Company, a private malevolent corporation run by the corrupt Caldwell B. Cladwell. Citizens who try to circumvent the peeing fee by relieving themselves in the bushes risk being taken away to Urinetown, a mysterious place where many have been sent, but no one ever returns. So as you can see, folks, very interesting plot, and of course this piece was very, very famous. It has very humble upbringings, which have been mentioned already here in the synopsis, in which Aaron and I will be talking about a little bit later on. And it has a very huge following in the U.S. to this day, as it's performed nationwide by universities, community theater groups, and the like. So that's the backstory, folks. Now let's head right to the discussions that I had with Mr. Richard Fitch and Mr. Aaron Lee Lambert. So we're back at the St. James Theatre, here with Mr. Richard Fitch. And Richard, you and I go back a little bit of a ways because you, like the lovely Miss Katie Bernstein, and myself, we all have roots at LIPA.
Yes,
we not?
This is true. Yeah.
So we met back in 2007, if you can believe that.
My God.
Almost 7 years since we first started there.
God, that's crazy.
So how has life post-LIPA been for you?
Life post-LIPA has been good, really good. I moved to London pretty much straight away, and I was really lucky. I did 4 years at LIPA. I did a diploma and then re-auditioned and did the degree, trained as an actor, and then halfway through realised that I wanted to direct, and LIPA were very good at sort of being that flexible on my course to enable that as a thing. But I was really lucky in that, I left Liverpool, sort of, that was my home for 4 years. On the Monday, I came straight down to London, had an interview to be an assistant on a new play on the Tuesday, and then I started the job on the Thursday.
Amazing.
And I was incredibly lucky, because I think without that sort of in a sense being thrown into a job straight away, I don't know whether I would have found London as approachable as a place initially. So I was really lucky, and so I've been in London ever since, and sort of dotted around the UK a little bit and done a bit of work overseas, but mainly been in London.
Cool. What projects have you been working on here in the UK?
I've been doing a lot of assisting. I started as an assistant at the Bush, and then I assisted at the Fimbra, and then I did a few other things on the Fringe scale, and then I became a resident assistant director at High Tide Festival Theatre and was there for a year. And then during that same year, I started trying to make that transition to directing a few bits. So I did the 24-hour plays at the Old Vic. I did the T.S. Eliot Exchange with a writer from New York, and we did that play at the Old Vic, and a few other places. Riverside Studios, did a few chamber operas, and sort of tried my hand at opera, and so I sort of experimented, I guess, and sort of just tried to use all of those muscles in different ways and see what stuck.
Cool. And so now you're resident director here at the St. James, is that right?
Correct.
So how did you end up at this place?
I was on my last job, which was the associate director on Panther at Lyric Hammersmith.
Okay.
And I just got a really nice email from Julian, the producer, one of the producers on Urinetown, who said Jamie wanted to meet you for this position. And me and Jamie we sort of knew each other to say hello to.
He's a fellow Lippa grad as well.
He's a fellow Lippa grad, yeah. So we had a few mutual friends, and obviously I've been a real fan of his work as a director for the last few years, and so we knew each other to sort of say hello to, but it was the first sort of meeting I'd had about actually working with him and being his resident. And so I just got a really nice email, and I arranged to meet up, and we met here at St James in the studio downstairs, and seemed to hit it off, and here I am a few months later being the resident on the show.
That's great. And for those of our listeners who aren't familiar with what that title necessarily entails, what does a resident director do?
It's interesting because I think over time, terms like resident director, associate director, assistant director, they've sort of merged into one a little in terms of their responsibilities. And it was funny because we spoke about this when I met with Jamie, and they made a conscious decision to not call my position an associate or an assistant, because they felt like resident offered something to everybody involved, a sense of me being here throughout the show from start to finish. So that there's an element of maintenance, which is probably part of the responsibility of any assistant or associate or resident, but the term resident kind of helps suggest that level of maintenance. So it involves things like maintaining the show that people see night to night, and making sure that it's as close to what Jamie left it as after press night and gala night, but also making sure that sense of discovery is still there. And certainly with a show like this, where we've got a cast of 21, we have different cast on each stage, on the stage each night, because we have different swings. So it's making sure that everyone as individuals have that opportunity to discover fresh each night, but within the boundaries that the piece sets. It also involves rehearsing understudies. We've done our first set of covers, finished that last Friday, and now today I've just started rehearsing the second covers from the top of the show. So it's never a dull moment, but all the better for it.
Right, exactly. And so the show in question, obviously, is Urinetown the Musical. How's it been going so far for you?
It's been going really great.
Yeah.
It's been an amazing, wacky, brilliant journey. And, the piece itself is a challenge, but a brilliant challenge to have. And the thing that's made this really special, both for me and I hope for everyone involved, is just the amazing company. And when I say company, I don't just mean the cast, who are incredible, but also everyone backstage, everyone that's not here every day, but in offices and around the world, sort of working hard to keep this show at the level it's at, and at the level that every audience has seen it at. It really is an incredible beast that I'm really proud to be a part of.
What was the rehearsal process like for you as the resident director? How did you fit into that equation?
It was great. I mean, we rehearsed for 5 weeks. We rehearsed in North London, and it was... I had a few extra responsibilities that I haven't had in other situations in the past. The scheduling would be mainly left up to me, along with the company manager, Pearlie. So I'd be scheduling the rehearsals day to day, and that in itself in this show is quite tricky, because there aren't often that many times in the show where you have less than everyone on stage.
Okay.
But within that, everyone is doing something different, because the piece is laid in a way where there's always different levels of action going on at one time. So to schedule that is quite an interesting thing, because people, we want to rehearse it. When we rehearse it, we want to pick it apart and discover it individually, but then you also want everyone to be there to put it all together. So the scheduling was an interesting challenge, but one that I think was an amazing opportunity for me to have to sort of get my head around with a cast this size.
Okay.
I've also never worked with understudies before in such a structured way, so often when I've had understudy situations before in the past, it's because we've needed someone on tonight, let's just go and do it. Whereas this offered a lot more of a structure behind that. Everyone's got their first covers, every character's got their second covers, and so just working out who each of those people are. And because it's such an individualistic piece where everyone sort of has their own quirks, it's been a real challenge, but a really nice responsibility to sort of harness each of those quirks based on the actors that are covering certain roles, so that we don't just get up there and imitate whatever Richard Fleischman is doing or Jenna Russell is doing, but we find everyone's own little version of their roles that they're covering. And that started from rehearsals.
So you've already touched a little bit on, now that the show is on its feet, how you kind of stay in touch, and you've been talking about working with understudies, working with the actual cast. How have the cast been in general to work with?
They've been truly incredible. Truly, I mean, I think that I've been very lucky throughout since I've left Lipper, and while I was at Lipper, I've just been lucky in general with the people that I've managed to work with, who have all been such lovely people. This really is a special company of 21 actors, along with the crew. There's just not a cynical bone in anyone's body. Everyone's here because they love the piece, they love the story, and they love coming into work and working with the people they work with. And the cynical part of me goes, well, it makes my job a lot easier. But it really does, and it really does take this level of the job it really does take the responsibilities of this job to a different place where you can just enjoy it sometimes.
Yeah.
And they're incredible. The cast they are truly brilliant, and the amount of work they have to put into the show night after night after night, show after sometimes doing 2 show days. I've never known a show like it where they have to put so much in, but they do it every night, no matter who the audience is, and it's just incredible to see that consistent work rate that they deliver every night. It's incredible.
And have you been having to watch every single performance since it started previews?
I've not. I did watch every preview. I did watch every single preview. So I didn't have apart from Sundays where we don't have shows. I didn't have a night off, as it were, until we pressed and we did gala night. And then since then, I've had the odd night where I've not watched it. But I'm normally in around 3 times a week.
Oh, cool.
And so I'll come in and I'll watch it and I'll note it, and then I'll come in the next day before the show to give those notes, drop those notes into the cast. It's a sign in itself. Another thing that shows this company off to be amazing is how hungry they are for notes and how keen they are to sort of keep it at that tightness that we had when Jamie was still in the building. And so I'm in about 3 times a week.
Very cool. So we talked a little bit with Katie in our previous interview about what her perspective has been from the audience reaction and that type of thing.
Sure.
How's the audience reaction been for you, actually sitting in the audience and watching performances?
It's been amazing. I mean, we've been really spoiled with audiences. We've had great audiences, and there's this weird adage to theatre, especially in London, where we kind of go, we get a Monday audience, or tonight we definitely got a Friday audience, and all of that. But actually, I think every single one of our audiences has just really gone for it, and I think part of that is because of the commitment that the actors put into it. But I think also we've been fortunate. We have an amazing building. We have an amazing front of house team that really look after the audience before they even enter our home in the theatre. And I think that says so much about the night, at a theatre. I think the whole experience from start to finish, it doesn't just start when you walk through the theatre doors and you hand your ticket over. But the audiences have been incredible, and they seem to be going for it. And I think also what I really feel like I should say is that we don't want to go for a gag. That's not our aim. We're always going for the truth of the situation. And if the gags come, the gags come. If the laughs come, the laughs come. But what we've always gone for is what the truth of the piece is. And I think that's been a sort of mantra that Jamie set up from day one of rehearsals, which has put us in really good stead. And it's working. It's why we're getting brilliant audiences.
That's perfect. That's exactly the way it should go.
Yeah.
And of course, you're trained well as a director. You're trained to absolutely, follow that mantra, which is absolutely brilliant. And it sounds like Jamie's taken that on as well, probably because he is also a LIPA graduate as well.
Exactly.
Do you know how much, did he have a directing background through LIPA itself, or did he have an acting background through them, similar to you?
From what I know, and don't quote me on this, but from what I know, he sort of did the similar thing that I found myself doing only a few years earlier. So, and I stress a few years, Jamie. He trained as an actor, but I think he dabbled in directing while he was at LIPA. Although they didn't have quite the structure that they had when I was there, of sort of directing electives and classes in directing.
Right.
So I think for Jamie it was more off his own back, using what we had as the independent student board, who would give you a little bit of money to just put your own show on internally. And I think Jamie dabbled in that and found through that he wanted to direct a lot more.
Okay.
So then he went to Edinburgh and he went to the National Student Drama Festival, and that's how he found his way into it. I think he did 1 or 2 acting jobs when he left, but I think really he already knew that that's the way he was going to go, I believe.
Cool. So the show is now running until essentially the beginning of May, is that right?
3rd of May, yeah.
3rd of May, so it's got a good month left under it.
Yeah.
Are you able to speak kind of officially or unofficially as to what the future of this particular production is, or do we not know yet?
Do you know what? If I knew, then even if I lied, you'd be able to tell that I was lying because I'm such a terrible liar. But it therefore makes me really happy to say that I genuinely cannot officially or unofficially say what's going on because I don't know.
A very eloquent way of saying no comment.
Well, kind of, but only because I can't, because I just don't know.
Sure.
So, but my honest answer is that fingers crossed,
Exactly, yeah.
Obviously, it, like every show ever under the sun, it fits people's tastes, and hopefully some of those people are owners of bigger venues and they are interested and they find it of their taste. And so, we'll see. But that's literally all I know. And, like we say, we've got about a month left, so let's hope we find out soon.
Exactly. And then what's the future going to hold for you then, regardless of what happens with this production?
Kind of fingers crossed again, really.
Okay.
I guess, it would be amazing if this did go anywhere. It would be amazing to go with it. That would be a lovely thing. And, I suppose it would all depend because arguably if it went, we could all go our separate ways and all the rest of it. But I'd really love to stick with it because it's been such a special thing, especially at the start of this year. And then otherwise, I'm just sort of plodding along. I'm working on a new play, which has just recently had a reading that was funded by the Arts Council, so that was great. We managed to develop that in an Oval House and got a designer on board who's a LIPA graduate. And so we're sort of now just doing the second pass on that and developing that. But it's one of my weaknesses that I really enjoy assisting being a resident now so much. So if more of these opportunities came along, then I'd find it hard to say no because I really enjoy that role.
Right.
So we'll see.
Cool, man. Sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Not at all.
And we'll chat with you later in the future, hopefully, man.
Nice, man. Thanks, David.
Take it easy.
Bye.
So now we're here talking to Mr. Aaron Lee Lambert about his role in Urinetown. So, Aaron, we already know a little bit about the piece already from having talked to Miss Katie Bernstein and Mr. Richard Fitch as well. So just tell us a little bit about your character.
I play a man by the name of Billy Boy Bill. He's a man of very few words, but he is an impoverished, might we say, poor person who lives in this dystopian city in the future.
Yeah.
And he just lives day to day trying to raise enough money to support his family and pay for his bowel movements and urinary obligations.
Absolutely,
as it is. Yeah, he's just a man, a simple man trying to get by, and he kind of gets caught up in everything that's happening in this revolution that is sparked by Bobby Strong.
And how do you feel like this community sort of works together, this community within the piece that are rising up against the government, so to speak? And how do you think your character sort of fits into that?
I think it's a community like any other, really. These are all kind of people in an extreme situation, but they're real people, and they kind of are reacting to the stimuli that are presented to them. So in the way Billy fits into it, he kind of is along for the ride at first, has very few things to say, but kind of as it picks up, he kind of finds his voice in the more violent aspects of their plot.
Okay.
But he's kind of easily influenced and goes with the flow, I think, a bit.
Excellent. And so how was the rehearsal process for you with this?
It was a really, really awesome rehearsal process, to be honest. Really, really creative, really, really open, really, really... It's such a really safe environment to play and try things and experiment and offer up suggestions and ideas that you don't always get in bigger scale musicals.
Definitely, yeah.
Our shows in general, really, there's kind of everything's prescribed as to kind of how things will go, but it was such a really great process. Jamie is amazing, and Annie, the choreographer as well, was just very, very open and giving, and it was just such a lovely, trusting environment, and I think everyone got to really give what they've got.
Sure. And what was it like working with some of the cast members, either the main cast members or some of your supporting cast as well?
It's been great. It's been great, and the really amazing and interesting thing about this project in particular is that Jamie took a really long time to cast it, and he kind of plucked people from different areas in the industry or people who have different strengths, and it was all about finding I think. I mean, don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but it was about finding a group of people that really could come together and create something, and that were all open in the same way, but all had different things to offer. So I think I learned so much from so many people in the cast, because, I mean, you do have your huge hitters, people who have these CVs that are amazing, and of course you're learning things from them, but you learn things from everyone, because everyone had such a unique offering, came from a unique background and had a very specific set of strengths that kind of added to the whole.
Okay, excellent. And so once you got into the rehearsal process, you're starting to work with this new cast. What was it like to work with this piece musically? Because, as we were talking about before this interview, because Urinetown the Musical is an American piece, we obviously have a bit more knowledge of it from where we come from, certainly than the British culture does. So, first, tell us what it was like getting into the musical aspects of it, because I'm guessing it's a lot easier for people like us to appreciate the styles of music, perhaps more so than the British. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the score is deceptively challenging. So if we're talking specifically musically, it was a lot. We sat down the first few days of rehearsal and kind of barreled through the entire score, and that's when all the people who play the poor people, the poor kind of side of the cast, we were like, oh my gosh, we're literally in every number bar two. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was a lot of music to learn. It's a lot of singing, a lot of ensemble work. So there was, if we're talking just literally about the music, that was a huge kind of. That was a huge undertaking from the jump. But the music director, Alan Williams, is great, and we really got specific really fast. So we were able to really progress and get everything nice and tight. I think the score, I mean, as you know, is very pastiche. It references a lot of different things, and it's very smart as well. And I think nowadays we're a bit more used to that, but when it came out 12 years ago, it was kind of innovative in that, in its self-referential nature, and though pastiche existed before that, by all means, in musical theater, it was very pointed and specific and kind of groundbreaking in that way. So I do think the score is standout and excellent, to be honest. Yeah.
Excellent, cool. Yeah. So now that it's on its feet, now that it's had a good couple of weeks run so far in the St. James, hasn't it? Mm-hmm. What's the experience been like for you now that you've moved into the space?
Oh, it's been great. It's such a great theater to work in. I mean, it's small. You know, it's smaller than most shows of this size would be in, but that's kind of forced us all to kind of force a camaraderie where our dressing rooms are small and tight, and we're all kind of on top of each other, and it kind of goes with the nature of the show. Yeah. But it's a great space, and ever since we moved in and we saw the set and got up there, it kind of just completed this world that we had been creating for so long in the rehearsal room. So after moving to theater, it kind of just kicked everything up a notch and into gear, and audiences have been so receptive, and I've never been in a show that has quite the reaction this one does. And because it's such an intimate space, you really feel that. So it's been really incredible.
Excellent. So how was the press night for you then in that regard? How was the response from that, and how was that experience for you?
It was great. I mean, press nights are always really fun and exciting just because it's a supportive group of people. Like, yes, you have press coming in, but you also have, people involved in the production all the way through. So, it's not as daunting as you might imagine. Like the press side of it kind of gets overshadowed by this kind of celebration of what we've accomplished and the goal we've reached, and kind of just sharing that with the people who all were involved in that.
And speaking of people who were involved with the piece, how involved were the original writers of Urinetown?
Mark and Greg came over when we first started.
Okay.
Mark was here for the first half of the first week. Greg stayed for a week and a half, almost 2 weeks.
Okay, cool.
And then they came back. Mark came back during previews, or for the Sitzprobe, really, and then for tech, and then previews, and then Greg came back for openings. They overlapped a couple days. So they were definitely involved, and I know Jamie was always throwing stuff at them, and we would come back with small rewrites, and it was definitely, they approached this production as well as kind of a completely new thing, and
cool.
Almost as if it were a new musical that never existed before, which is something you don't always get, and which was really exciting. But both of them are really, really lovely people. And I will mention that Mark Holloman, who wrote the music, actually went to my high school.
No kidding.
Can you believe that?
That's incredible. And where was that?
Belleville East.
Okay.
In Belleville, Illinois. So random.
That is
so
random and amazing.
Yeah, so random. Very amazing. But my old drama teacher emailed me saying, I think the person who wrote the show you're in went to Belleville East. And I was like, what? And then first preview, I was like, so let's just talk about B100. That was the name of our theater.
Okay.
And he was like, B100? How do you know about B100? And I was like,
Nice.
well, we went to the same high school.
And people, and this is something our London friends might not necessarily get. To have somebody like that come from your hometown is very rare, unless you're from Chicago or New York.
Yeah, exactly. Extremely rare. Like Belleville,
Yeah.
Illinois, everyone I went to high school lives within 30 miles. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Very
totally.
Midwestern mentality kind of place. And yeah, so to have someone from my high school that I reconnect with in a professional way so much later in life it just seems like the stars aligned, you know.
Exactly, that's amazing.
It's
Yeah.
meant to be.
So let's talk about more of like the American side of things, because,
Yeah.
like I said, it's a different perspective for people like us, and certainly with you being in the piece, the fact that this is a very American show and it has a huge history in the U.S. and certainly not as much over here in Britain. First of all, let's talk about what is it about the piece that appeals to people, certainly from the U.S. side, and how do you think that's then translated over here with this audience?
I think Urinetown, when it first came out in the States, you know, it was just the underdog show. You know what I mean? It was the show the grassroots show that came from the unconventional place. You know, it came from kind of sketch comedy in Chicago, and then they did it at New York Fringe, and then from there they did it. That led to the off-Broadway production, which led to the Broadway production. So it was a very unconventional way to get a show to Broadway. So it was always kind of the underdog, the anti-musical musical, the musical for people who like really appreciate musicals, that kind of thing. And I think that idea is a very American idea. You know what I mean?
It is. Yeah.
So in and of itself, the show kind of had this cult following that kind of helped it and drove it to be as successful as it was, and to kind of get to where it was from where it started.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, and also because of the type of humor is involved, it is so very American in its feel and its kind of and just kind of the way it speaks. So I think that's probably why it took so long for it to come over to London.
Okay.
Because I know that I know even Julie and our producer, they talked about bringing it over straight after, like 2003, 2004, 2005. They were doing workshops and stuff, but it just never was the right time. But I think it kind of took the right group of people to come together, right creative team, and a bit of time until they brought it over. And this production's so different from the New York production.
Right.
So, so I think it was also trying to find a new way, a new voice, a new way to tell the story that's fresh and applicable to the times, and also to where we are, you know, geographically as well.
Sure. So how do you think then the British audience has picked up on that? Do you think that's translated well ultimately over here?
I definitely do. I really do. I think that I think it's definitely not everyone's cup of tea. You know what I mean? Because it is, you know, self-referential, and it's tongue-in-cheek, and it's
very gritty at the heart of it as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Ultimately.
And especially this production of it. Like, Jimmy was really, really keen to key in on the truth of the storytelling and the plight these characters are going through. No matter how ridiculous their circumstances are, they're still these real people's circumstances.
Yeah.
And no matter how ridiculous these real people are, they're still, you know, people with wants and needs and dreams and goals and aspirations. So it was about, you know, being very true to the truth and the kind of weight of the situation, because it's a revolution, and it's not some day that someone flippantly decides, you know, I'm going to overthrow the government. Like, these are huge, huge, huge things for these people.
Yeah,
you know,
big
like life changing, world changing, literally. You know, so that was really important to us when we kind of dove into it. Yeah. But I think the British audiences have been very receptive and open to the type of humor and the type of show it is. probably more so than people might have given them credit for.
Totally,
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think that's something, and you might agree with me, again, since we both have the American perspective. I think the British, and this is certainly something that we've been experiencing over at the Palladium with I Can't Sing, is the British definitely have a wider and broader sense of humor, I think, than Americans do on a lot of things. There are a lot of things that are less taboo, and I'm thinking specifically about like the pantomime tradition.
Yeah, of course.
And things like that. Things like innuendo and things like jokes that you might take a little bit too far, and might go too far in the U.S., don't necessarily go that far or hit too close to the bone here.
Right, sure.
So I think American pieces with weird senses of humor, kind of like this show, do translate well over here, or at least people in Britain get it a lot more than I think they realize they will. Would you agree with that, Earl?
I definitely agree with that. I think that there are definitely things in the show that are really specific and minute, but people pick up on it and people get it and people kind of understand the humor. So I think you're definitely right in saying that.
And they understand irony a lot better in this
country. I mean, they would say we don't understand it at all. So.
How ironic.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Excellent. So before we close today, dude, you and I worked together back in 2011, was it? Early 2011,
Yeah.
I think. We worked with Dougal Irvine and the folks at Perfect Pitch on a piece with them. And so how's life been treating you in between then and here?
Well, since then, I was in Shrek the Musical,
right,
in town for 2 years. So that brings us up to the beginning of last year, and then
really that was that soon, wasn't it?
Yeah. And then I did a fringe show. I did a couple concert tours.
Good. Yeah.
And that brings us to this. But I'm also a writer as well. So in that time, I've been promoting a show that I wrote that Perfect Pitch produced.
Which one does that remind us?
It's called From Up Here.
Right.
It made its premiere in June 2012. It was broadcast live on Wilton Stage. It was this digital media project we did, and but since then we've been pushing licensing of it, and we have a theater company. Several universities have done it now, and we have a theater company doing it at Brighton Fringe next month. And the U.S. premiere is in August at a theater in Indiana.
Awesome.
So
well done.
Yeah. So I'm also pushing that side of things. And
so remind us what that's about. That piece.
From Up Here, it's a musical, and it's about kind of time and change and choices. So it's set on the Brooklyn Bridge, and we meet some characters some of whom are in ways interlinked, and others who just meet each other and affect each other's lives in different ways. And we kind of follow these people over the course of a full year, different interactions they have while on the bridge. And the bridge is kind of a metaphor for liminality and kind of being in between two places. And whether I choose to walk to Brooklyn or Manhattan, my life's going to be different, but I'm still on solid ground. Though all those cheesy metaphors.
That's great.
But yeah, no, it was. I worked with Perfect Pitch for 4 years, labor of love, and I'm very proud of how it turned out. And there's an album out, so you can check out the songs if you'd like.
Definitely should be available at Dress Circle as well on their website.
Yeah, it's on Dress Circle.
I know they definitely had it in stores at one point.
Yeah.
Excellent. And so, were you serving as the sole writer of it? Were you doing book, music, and lyrics?
I was, yeah.
Well done. That's an undertaking.
Yeah.
Definitely a labor of love then.
It was a lot. It was good, though. It was good. It was such a rewarding process and experience. And yeah, the first time I went to see a production of it after our production, so I worked on it for 4 years, and everything that had to do with it I was involved in. And then, we started licensing it. And the first time I saw it, when other people did it and I had no idea or nothing to do with it, it was such an amazing experience. It was just seeing it kind of walk on its own and be its own thing without me being like, I meant this. No, you're supposed to do it like this because I meant, no, listen, I meant it this way. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly,
I can write things down on a piece of paper and hand them over, and it still is the thing.
Exactly,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
That was really exciting.
And so what can we expect any future performances from you after you're in town, or any more productions of your show? What does the future hold for you?
At the moment, I'm still working out what's happening next. There are a couple of irons in the fire. Like I said, From Up Here is going to be a Brighton Fringe, so I'm going to try to go down and support that next month and check out that production. Other than that, I'm just kind of working and seeing what's next.
Good, man.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks for talking with us today, man. It's been brilliant as always. Good to see you.
You as well. Thank you so much.
This Musical Talk episode was presented and edited by David Herzog. Copyright 2014. Except for the theme music, which is copyright Chip DeFaw Productions, LLC. See you at the theater, folks.